The House of the People was built in 1898. In Danish, that's Folketshuset. It was a union hall, first rate. In the 1970s, it fell into disrepair, and in '82 it got squatted by kids with spiky hair. It became a punk rock social center and left-wing to the core. Since I came to Copenhagen, I did shows there by the score. But the first time that I played there, I was nearly felled by the most disgusting microphone I have ever smelled. As I approached the mic stand and took in a deep breath, I was overpowered by the rotting stench of death. I managed to recover and make it through the set, but if there's a stinkier mic than that one, I haven't smelled it yet. Between anarchists and government, it's not an easy dance. And when a Christian sect bought Ungdomshuset, the state jumped at the chance. The cops landed on the roof in the middle of the night, filled the place with tear gas, and geared up for a fight. Masked workers came from Poland. They were taken to that spot. And guarded by police, they then destroyed the squat. But as the smoke was rising, I thought, well, at least, that really stinky microphone would be thankfully deceased. And as the smoke was rising, I thought about those nights, a room packed full of nose rings glittering in the lights, everybody smoking all kinds of different things, and the stinkiest mic through which I've ever tried to sing. There were weekly demonstrations with kids about to lose it. They said, "The government took our building. Give us a new Ungdomshuset." There were protests, there were riots, there were burning barricades. There were politicians looking on at the mess they'd made. 30 squatters were in prison, and when I was back in town, we went there to visit, at the edge of Copenhagen. I got on the sound truck, and I began to strum, and I was suddenly accosted by the smell of someone's bum. It was then I realized, without a single doubt, that microphone had been rescued. Someone had gotten it out. Here it was before me, a reminder of the past, before cops and helicopters came and filled the place with gas. After quite a lot of struggle, the kids got another squat. And the punks are back in Denmark, whether you like it or not. It's a movement that inspired folks, wherever they may be found. For example, in Malmö, just across the Sound, where someone opened a museum to recall struggles far and near, where sitting on a shelf, I observed with cheer a thing so noxious and repulsive that it took my breath away. The world's most offensive microphone was now Exhibit A. That mic had been retired and was now beyond rebuke, after years of service amid the cigarettes and puke, and it should surely have a place, perhaps you feel the same, if someday someone opens the Punk Rock Hall of Fame. Good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. This is David Rovics, and this is March in History and Song and Poetry. And that was Ungdomshuset's microphone, which is, well, you know what it's about because you just heard it. But it is related to March in History and Song because it was on March 1st, 2007, when Ungdomshuset was raided by the police and destroyed. For some reason, there's no sound that seems to be coming through. So if you can hear me or not, let me know in the chat room there. And in March 2009, AIG was bailed out for the 4th time, and here's a song related to that. Because this is where they buy the politicians. Because this is where power has its seat. Because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on this street. Because all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%. Because these greedy banksters rob the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. Because the last time that we had a decent government was about 1932.
Because we the people are supposed to run this country, but instead it's all run by and for the few. Because now we know the rich do not pay taxes, but when they need a hand, it's us who bail them out. Because we suspected we lived in a plutocracy, but suddenly of late there is no doubt. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because both my parents lost their savings, because I have never opened an account, because the interest on my credit card just doubled, and now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral, that our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live, but I can't afford to drive a car. Because so many of us don't have health insurance. The rest of us have it, but it sucks. Because the rich are flying in their private jets, while the rest of us are slogging through the muck. Because capitalism isn't working. This system has just failed to produce. Because the 1% are prospering, while the rest of us just suffer their abuse. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who had smashed it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square. Where a young man named Mohammed Bouazizi struck a match that lit up all the earth. And all around the world the spell was broken, and a movement for the future was in birth. Because there's only so much the rich can feed us before we figure out which side we're on. Because we've learned if we want our liberation, it will only come if we stay here till the rising of the dawn. So we're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because corporate rule isn't working, and it's time for humans' hearts and minds. Because you can't take it with you, because the rich just do not care. Because it doesn't matter how much you make, but how much you can share. Because these moments don't come often, because we want truly to be free. Because we know what really matters, something called society. So we're gonna stay right here. 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 stay right here.
And on March 3rd, 1944, the city of Berlin, Germany, was pretty much completely destroyed, and 50,000 people, mostly women and children, killed by the U.S. and British Air Forces.
I saw it in a photo. It said all I need to know. It's an image that has followed me wherever I may go. When I look into your eyes, I can only guess at where you've been. Looking at the skyline of Berlin. The buildings are all shattered, as in a silent roar. The streets are all just rubble. The year is 1944. I guess I just don't understand this world we live in, as I'm looking at the skyline of Berlin. When I look into your face, I can hear the dying cries, the sadness of the world reflected in your eyes. The picture of a city flattened like a tin, looking at the skyline of Berlin. Talk about the Blitz and all those good people gone. You can claim you are fighting evil. You can ask which side I'm on. But all I see is horror, a war only death would win. When I'm looking at the skyline of Berlin.
And today, March 9th, is, as Liam just mentioned in the chat room, is the birthday of MP Bobby Sands. And I'll be doing some more related to Bobby Sands coming up in the order that I've got the songs loaded in. And March 10th, March 10th, 2006 was the first of a series of protests that happened over the course of, I guess, really like 2 months, basically, in 2006, which represented what might have been the biggest social movement ever to happen in the United States, and also one of the shortest, because it really only lasted for like 2 months, but it was absolutely staggeringly huge and amazing to participate in. The first sign of it, the first round, basically was 500,000 people in Chicago protesting congressional efforts to make being undocumented a felony offense. And this is a song I wrote about that very question several years earlier than that.
This song goes out, I guess, more now than ever to the Arab American community, but I wrote it more with Latin Americans in mind. Of course, so many folks are in the same boat, hopefully not soon facing indefinite detention for being immigrants. Clouds gather in your forests, drift to my desert town. I think of far-off places as the rain is coming down. You're bent down in the fields, picking fruit there from the vine, and it ends up on my table as it moves on down the line. The moon shines brightly in the night sky. The river flows from south to north. With the changing of the seasons, the birds migrate back and forth. They say that you can't come here, not in the light of day. Somebody has got plans for you. Starve at home or hide away. Will we open up the borders, tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal? Watch the giant as it falls. So much travels across these borders. So much is bought and sold. One way goes the gunships, the other comes the gold. Free trade is like a needle, drawing blood straight from your heart. The border's like a prison, keeping friends apart. Will we open up the borders, tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal? Watch the giant as it falls. Hear the stockholders cheering. The world's getting smaller. Hear the drowning child crying. Why are the fences growing taller? Some whisper in the shadows, while others count the dollars. Some have suits and ties, others chains and collars. Will we open up the borders, tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal? Watch the giant as it falls. May these fortress walls come down. May we meet our sisters and our brothers, stand arm in arm there in the daylight, no longer fighting one another. Will we stand together, for therein lies our might? Will we understand these words? Workers of the world unite. Will we open up the borders, tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal? Watch the giant as it falls. Open up the borders, tear down the prison walls, declare that no one is illegal. Watch the giant as it falls.
I'm sure I had been listening to a lot of Dick Gaughan when I wrote that guitar part. In case you don't know Dick Gaughan, you should check him out. He plays guitar better than me. March 11th March 11th last year was when I first put online my 1,000 friends subscriber scheme, and actually got several new subscribers this morning since I put out an anniversary email about it, and thank you, all of you out there who have joined that scheme to crowdsource my career and allow me to fly to protests and stuff without having to line up paying gigs first, which isn't quite happening yet, but if I get a few hundred more, it will. And anyway, getting back to real history, that's sort of history, but very tangential and personal history. But getting back to history that actually affected a hell of a lot more people. March 11th, 2011 was a date when hundreds of thousands, 100,000, I can't remember the number, but a tremendous number of Japanese people lost their lives on that date. And then in many towns were completely destroyed. And then on top of the complete devastation of the earthquake and the tsunami, the nuclear disaster began to unfold and is still unfolding. But in terms of the tsunami and the earthquake, here's a song about a town that no longer exists.
It was only last week that I walked past the water. I remembered last summer and the candles we made. The whole town was there beside the river on that warm August night of the lantern parade. With the breeze on our backs, we walked home together. We unrolled our futons when the night was through. Oji-chan was sleeping, so we tried not to wake him. That's how life was in Minami Sanriku. It was only last week that I came home from school. My parents were working, but my grandpa was there. He threw a ball in my hand, looking ever so cool, in his corduroy jacket and his wavy white hair. I said, "Hello, Oji-chan," and I threw him the ball. It went kinda like that for the whole afternoon. The sun had gone down when we heard Oka-san call. We went inside to eat in Minami Sanriku. It was only last week I was sitting in class with the rest of the kids on top of the hill. We
Oh, Jesus, I thought I had fixed that. Damn. Well, I hate it when that happens. Oy vey. Well, that's like the second or third time that I've played that song without finishing it. That's fucking annoying. Well, moving on. In this imperfect broadcast, on March 15th, 1981, Irish Republican Army volunteer Francis Hughes became the second of 10 prisoners of war to begin a hunger strike to the death. The first, of course, being Bobby Sands, who would have turned I can't do the math, but let's see. 70 if he had lived on March 9th. But here's a song about Francis Hughes.
He grew up on a farm in a troubled Irish land, under foreign rule and the British Crown's command. His father fought for Ireland 50 years before, but the Free State cut their losses and the English won the war. When internment without trial was the order of the day, when his brother was arrested and his friends were blown away, when he was beaten near to death, he decided, come what may, he'd throw his lot in with the provost and he joined the IRA. In the occupied 6 counties, perhaps it never will be known, all the foreign soldiers in Armagh and Tyrone who decided to head back across the Irish Sea so they wouldn't have to meet the man from south of Derry. He never wavered in his battle for Irish liberty, and the Crown would soon regret the day they called him enemy. The Brits called it bandit country and it filled them all with fright. In the borderlands, you who walked the hills at night. Up the Provost, that's what he said. 3 little words that filled the British Crown with dread. With a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Once he was surrounded by the SAS. How he might escape was anybody's guess. In his boots and camouflage, he didn't miss a beat. He walked right past the soldiers and out into the street. Once he came upon a checkpoint, the soldier didn't want to die. He recognized our Francis and the soldier waved him by. He didn't want to find out if he could take what he could give. He knew there'd be a shootout and the soldier chose to live. Up the Provost, that's what he said. And from this farmer's son, better men had fled. With a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Was the North's most wanted man with his photo everywhere, but he eluded capture with his wit and dyed blonde hair. For 6 years he was active, 3 times as long as most. He became a legend north to south and coast to coast. He came upon 2 soldiers out one night on patrol. They caught him in the firefight and the bullets took their toll. Crawled off into the bushes, but they found him the next day. Grabbed him by his arms and they carried him away. Up the Provost, that's what he said. With a shattered bone and a body full of lead, with a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. They beat him and they tortured him and they gave him 80 years. When they brought him to the H blocks, he was greeted there with cheers. He went right onto the blanket, and when the hunger strike began, he was the first to volunteer, along with Bobby Sands. He was an Irish soldier, that's how he did his time. He knew he was no criminal, occupation was the crime. Bobby Sands had passed beyond us, where Francis soon would be. And although he couldn't stand and he could barely see, up the Provost, that's what he said, as they carried him to hospital to lay in his deathbed, with a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Up the Provost, that's what he said, and soon there'd be another standing in his stead, with a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes.
I took that song too slow, I think. That's the recording from Big Red Sessions, but I do it better now. That happens a lot. I record a song that I wrote fairly recently, and I take it too slow, and then it speeds up later. Or maybe it speeds up too much, I don't know, but I think it belongs in a faster pace. But darn good bass playing in there, that guy. So March 16th, 1968 is a day of infamy in the annals of imperialism. It was the day that 500 unarmed women, children, and men were massacred by U.S. troops in the village of My Lai in Vietnam. And there would have been even more people killed if it hadn't been for the intervention of helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson and his crew, who engaged in a 15-minute armed standoff with the American soldiers who were trying to kill the last of the remaining women and children who were huddling in a small building waiting to die. This is only one of many similar incidents in the Vietnam War, as well as in the Korean War, as well as in the American invasion of the Philippines several decades earlier. But we know about it because Hugh Thompson showed up.
Hugh Thompson was a pilot, just like many more, fighting for Old Glory on a far-off foreign shore. He was on a lethal mission, only one of many, following his orders to kill the enemy, to kill the enemy. He flew low above the village, searching for the foe, when he saw a wounded child on the path below. He thought this to be a sure sign that the enemy was near, so he radioed for backup and more choppers did appear. More choppers did appear. Help the wounded, he cried out, and beware of an attack. And then the child died by a bullet through her back. And when he looked around for the culprits of the scene, it was a company of men in U.S. military green. U.S. military green. The dead were in the hundreds, strewn all around in this place called My Lai, which once had been a town. There was a hut of huddled children, soldiers had them in their sights. Hugh decided at that moment to fight for what was right, to fight for what was right. Train your
weapons on the GIs, and his copter crews obeyed, and stood among the children, tattered and afraid. The whole town had been murdered, but for some kids and widowed wives, and Hugh Thompson made sure that those remaining would survive, that those remaining would survive. It was a 15-minute standoff in a knee-deep sea of red, amidst the moaning of the dying and the silence of the dead. Hugh Thompson was a soldier, and he served his country well. On the day he saved the lives of a dozen kids in hell, of a dozen kids in hell.
And on, where were we? On March 16th, 2003, same date, International Solidarity Movement volunteer from Olympia, Washington, Rachel Corrie, was killed by an Israeli soldier driving over her with an armored bulldozer as she tried to protect the home of a Palestinian doctor in Rafah in the Gaza Strip. It was, I guess, shocking, especially to me and many others who had. This was before blogs and stuff, Facebook and all that, and so people still paid attention to email lists because that's how things happened. And so there was an email list that the International Solidarity Movement was maintaining that. And where every week there'd be a bunch of different posts by different volunteers who were there in the occupied territories, and I was reading them, and not reading all of them, but reading some of them, and noticed what a great writer this one named Rachel Corrie was. And so every time I would get an email from them, I would scan it for posts by Rachel Corrie and read those posts. And so I had never met her, as far as I know, although I'd done a lot of gigs in Olympia and we had a lot of mutual friends, so it's quite possible that we did meet. But I was a big fan of her writing, which was fantastic. And when I heard about her death, I wrote this song.
She sat down in the dirt in front of your machine, a lovely woman dressed in red, you in military green. If you had met her in Jerusalem, you might have asked her on a date. But here you were in Gaza, rolling towards the gate. As your foot went to the floor, did you recall her eyes? Did her gaze remind you that you've become what you despise? As you rolled on towards this woman and ignored all shouts to stop, did you feel a shred of doubt as you watched her body drop? As your caterpillar tracks upon her body pressed with 60 tons of deadly force, crushed the bones within her chest. Could you feel the contours of her face as you took her life away? Did you serve your country well on that cool spring day? when you went back across the green line, back to the open shore? Was this just another day in a dirty war? When you looked out on the water, did you feel an empty void? Or was it just one more life you've taken, one more home destroyed, one more home destroyed?
And of course, March 17th is St. Patrick's Day.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We got about at least a quarter of a battalion right here, so you can sing along with it. Marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin gold brow, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad Par Republica. Just 50 years after Wolfe Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. What'd we do? We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. Major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, We witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
And let's see, on St. Patrick's Day, actually, in 1992, President George H.W. Bush presented Sam Walton, one of the world's richest men, founder of Walmart, and the man probably most responsible for the impoverishment of the working class in the U.S., with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So here's a song for that very, very, very rich man and his entire family.
There's 1,000 acres becoming clear. Cut down the forest, the big ones here. Cover the ground with a mass of tar. Make sure there's room for every car. 1 floor, half mile, massive sprawl. 1 store wonder, super mall. It's spreading out far and wide, taking over the countryside. Say goodbye to your forests, they're going down. Walmart is coming to town. Your sons and daughters will have a fit at the mountains of plastic shit. Chinese prisoners will sweat and bleed, and you'll get all the stuff you need. Walton's children, profits reap, buying low and selling cheap. And what happens to mom and pop? Turn the key and close the shop. Say goodbye to your city, it's shutting down. Walmart is coming to town. There goes the local department store. See the diner shut its door. No more neighbors you can meet. More ghosts than people on the street. No more jobs with living pay. Sam Walton took it all away. Beneath the lights they'll work you bare. The lucky ones can get on welfare. Forget your children's cap and gown. Walmart is coming. Walmart is coming. Walmart is coming to town.
And on March 18th, in 1839, the British Navy bombed China, or I guess they called it bombarded back then, because they didn't bomb from the skies; they bombed from the rivers and seasides, which of course is where most cities in the world are located. So you can do a hell of a lot of damage to cities by bombarding them from from naval bombardment. March 18th, 1839, as at least a couple of people in the chat room would be well aware, was the beginning of the first Opium War between China and on one side, and Britain, the United States, France, and Russia on the other side. And it was a war that was supposedly fought around free trade. So it's kind of interesting. I've been reading up on the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is interesting for many reasons. But one of those reasons is that here we are 250 or so years after the first Opium War, and there's this trade deal that everybody is putting together between a dozen different countries, but one of those countries that are specifically excluded from the trade deal is, of course, China.
Let me tell you a tale, stir a hornet's nest, well remembered in the East, most forgotten in the West. It was the 1830s, and the Industrial Revolution was turning Europe into a land of wage slaves and air pollution. The history books tell us it was the era of free trade, and the entire world hungered for the products Europe made. Merchants plied their wares across the 7 seas, and they brought back things like porcelain, silk, and tea. Soon all the tea in China could barely keep the West awake. Such a thirst for Chinese products as could barely be slaked. They liked to drink their tea in cups of Chinese porcelain, and those who could afford it loved the silk upon their skin. But what made the merchants and the monarchs scream and cry and shout? They seemed to have little to offer that China could live without. They didn't want their muskets and they didn't want their wool, which left the British coffers empty and the Chinese coffers full. And they called it a trade war. They called it a trade war, and I guess that could be so. They say it's not free trade if it's just a one-way flow, because apparently free trade is when the West comes out ahead. That's how it is in practice, though that's never what is said. The fact of history they'd have a sweep under the rug. The one thing they could sell in China was an addictive drug. It had long been banned by Chinese law, but the British didn't care. They packed the opium up in crates and they shipped it there. And they called it a trade war. It all came to a head in 1838. When the soldiers of the emperor torched 20,000 crates. It took 3 days to burn it, and when the fires had gone out, the Chinese people would soon learn what free trade was all about. Navies came from Britain, France, and the USA. In blood, land, and silver they would make the Chinese pay. Cities leveled, thousands killed. The war was 3 years long. That's how they opened China. That's how they got Hong Kong. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war.
And let's see, on the same date, March 18th in 2003, the slaughter began in Iraq by the United States and Britain and others, resulting in the killing of untold hundreds of thousands of innocent people, as well as draftees. And originally, the war was actually called Operation Iraqi Liberation before they changed the name to Operation Iraqi Freedom. This is really true. I did not make it up.
We've got a situation and it calls for a solution that upholds our domination of the planet. We're gonna make our case and we're gonna make it well. And if you don't like our logic, you can can it. We'll use impeccable intelligence from any country in the world, as long as we all see eye to eye. And if we don't find quite what we need, we know what to do. Just look into the camera and lie. It's Operation Iraqi Liberation. Tell me, what does that spell? Operation Iraqi Liberation. And we'll lie about the missiles and the nuclear research. We'll lie about uranium. We'll build military bases and smile for reporters as we give away bubble gum. And we'll lie about Bin Laden, his connections with the Saudis. We'll lie about 911. And we'll lie about the Baathists, their connections to Al-Qaeda, because we know there's none. It's Operation Iraqi Liberation. Tell me, what does that spell? Operation Iraqi Liberation. O-I-L. We'll lie about the North weapons, and we'll lie about Iran and don't mention Israel. Keep those nuclear weapons out of this song, it'll all hold together swell. Now we'll liberate these people, we'll liberate their money, we'll liberate their soil. We'll liberate their airports, we'll liberate their harbors, and we'll liberate their oil. Operation Iraqi Liberation, tell me, what does that spell? Operation Iraqi Liberation, O-I-L. Operation Iraqi Liberation, tell me, what does that spell? Operation Iraqi Liberation, O-I-L.
And on March 22nd, in the very momentous year of 1919, a man named Henk Strefkerk was born. And I had put up this thing on my website a while back, saying that I wrote songs on commission as well as just for lots of other reasons, but there's a long and largely very positive tradition of songwriters and musicians writing songs and musical compositions on commission, because you can write for lots of other reasons, but it's nice when somebody really wants something written enough that they're willing to pay for you to take the time to do the research and write the song and record it. There's a lot of expenses involved with all that, with taking time and with getting a studio and all that stuff. So it's a wonderful thing when somebody thinks it's worth actually paying you to do. And so far, nobody's ever paid me to write a song that I didn't want to write anyway, so there's no moral contradiction there. But I guess the politicians say the same thing about the lobbyists. But in my case, it's true. And I got an email one day from a man in Hamburg, Germany, named Robin Chiera, who is a direct descendant of Henk Strefkerk, who was a Dutch resistance fighter who saved many lives during the German occupation of the Netherlands. And Robin said, somebody should write a song. He wanted me to write a song about Henk, and I was very glad to hear from him, because I don't know if I would have gotten around to writing a song about a Dutch resistance fighter otherwise. I'd like to think I would have, but it certainly prompted a lot of reading about the German occupation of the Netherlands and about the Dutch resistance, and some amazing stories in there. And it took me about a year, actually, to get around to actually writing the song, because I felt like I needed to be familiar with the subject material more, and took a while to get there because I was busy with touring and a lot of other things. But eventually I felt like I had the idea, and what took a long time especially was trying to get a hold of the Dutch, if you could call it the Dutch mentality, of how they viewed the occupation and how they looked at the history there of that episode in history, because it's really different from the attitude that you might find in the songs of the partisans in Italy, or it's a different mentality, much less sort of glorious victory, fighting fascism type of stuff, and much more like wow, why did that have to happen? That really sucked, And anyway, here's the song I wrote, which is on my album Into a Prism, called Henk.
There are those who will tell stories of their youth so long ago, They'll talk of past adventures like a wild picture show. They'll talk of comrades lost and lovers found along the way. They'll tell of how they almost didn't live to see today. And then there are the many who never made it through, who leave their friends and family to wonder if they knew. Who leave their friends and family to wonder if they knew. And to always ask the questions about what they didn't do. To always ask the question, why did they survive while others died to see the day that they would be alive? For some, the liberation was a great heroic feat. For others, it's all much more bittersweet. We didn't want another hero, a noble struggle to employ. We just want our leave a young'un. We just want our boy. Hank Strefkirk was born in Arden. As the story goes, he went to work for Philips, to work on radios. He lived through the Depression. Next came the German tanks. Friends joined with the resistance. Hank also joined their ranks. He lived an unassuming life beneath Holland's cloudy sky, working quietly at night, not to draw a German eye. We didn't want another hero, a noble struggle to employ. We just want our leave a young'un. We just want our boy. Hank Strefkirk was killed. That's how history is made. Till this day, no one knows how he was betrayed. He was standing on the sidewalk. He was executed there, left lying on the pavement. Blood spattered his blonde hair. 4 days later, the war was over. They say the Allies won. Many people celebrated while the Strefkirks buried their only son. We didn't want another hero, a noble struggle to employ. We just want our leave a young'un. We just want our boy. It was more than 60 years after the occupation's awful toll. Someone noticed Hank wasn't on the honor roll, and on a wall somewhere, perhaps now, his name will be engraved. They'll thank him for his courage and the families he saved. He'll join the thousands of Nederlanders and millions more, all the Lieve young'uns killed in the world wars. We didn't want another hero, a noble struggle to employ. We just want our Lieve young'un. We just want our boy.
And on the same day that Hank Strefkirk was born in 1919, in 2012, President Obama endorsed the construction of the southern half of the Keystone XL pipeline.
As soon as they started drilling for oil, they started building pipelines on the seabed through the forests and across the border lines. As soon as they started laying the pipe, they said, we'll do this safely. There will never be an accident. We can do this carefully. But the sands shift, the ice melts, disasters are routine. Point out their record of destruction, and they'll say their hands are clean. Point out their woeful deeds, and they'll consult their banker and say it's safer to use a pipeline than an oil tanker. So now they want to see how far their
madness it can go. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. The tar sands line the north, beneath Alberta's ground. As the price of oil rises, the oil men have found. Now there's profit to be made in a madman's dream by drilling deep beneath earth, blasting it with steam, bulldozing the land, melting what's inside. A record of extinction 1,000 miles wide, but laying waste to the northern plains is evidently not enough. The capitalists need markets where they can sell this toxic stuff. So across the farms and prairies, the oil now must flow. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. Governors oppose it, and every native band. Ranchers don't want it passing through their land. Union leaders have denounced it, as have the rank and file. The president delayed it for just a little while. They say you can't stop progress. I hope that isn't true, 'cause if we mine the tar sands, if we let the pipeline through, it will be a pipeline to oblivion, a pipeline to the end, a pipeline to a future with nothing round the bend, a pipeline to a future that I hope we'll never know. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. A pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. Pipeline from the tar sands to the Gulf of Mexico. And on March 24th, 1978, Khader Adnan was born. And as I've just learned in the chat room, he shares a birthday, well, the same month. He was born same month in a different year as Bobby Sands. And both Khader Adnan from Jenin, Palestine, and Bobby Sands from the northern 6 counties of Ireland would spend much of their adult lives in prison. And of course, in Bobby Sands' case, he would die on hunger strike. In Khader Adnan's case, he would go the same number of days on hunger strike before ending his hunger strike after Israel agreed to free him. And I wrote a song about his hunger strike while it was still going on, and recorded it with the same fabulous musicians from Florida via Venezuela and Colombia, who you just heard on Pipeline playing those different instruments. Alejandro Arenas and June Bustamante, both fantastic musicians who live in the St. Pete area in Florida and play together and separately and in various formations. If anybody's ever in Florida, you definitely should go check them out. Anyway, here's Khader Adnan, Bobby Sands. Khader Adnan grew up near Jenin City. You could say he was a product of his time. Ever since he was a kid, he'd get arrested, though he was never charged with any crime. Spending half his life in prison, a life lived like so many of his friends. Arbitrary and indefinite detention, never knowing if your jail time would end. Khader Adnan was arrested last December. Again, he wasn't told the reason why. He was shackled, he was beaten, he was tortured, there beneath the Middle Eastern sky. Perhaps there was a moment when he realized that right then with his body he'd say no. But from then on he refused to eat another meal, like in Belfast not many years ago. Khader Adnan grew up in a war zone, but all the tanks and planes were only on one side. It was a type of war that they call occupation, settlement, removal, fratricide. And anyone who talked about resistance, who thought they did not deserve to be a slave, would be looking down the barrel of a gun and often find themselves inside an early grave. Khader Adnan loves his wife and daughters, and he likes to eat his daily bread. But in prison he can't see his children
or live life with the lady that he wed. So on behalf of all the children without fathers, he decided he had to strike a blow. He said, I will have dignity or death, like in Belfast not many years ago. Each time Khader Adnan was arrested, in prison he would learn a little more. And soon he became the teacher. And he'd talk about the times that came before. They talked about civil disobedience. They talked about the ballot and the gun. They talked about the occupied 6 counties and the H blocks in 1981. Khader Adnan talked of perseverance and how someday their people might be free. How someday they might hear their children laughing, unafraid how someday things could be. Then at 3:30 on one morning, the soldiers came, their rifles pointed low, and they took Khader Adnan from his family, like in Belfast not many years ago. They say Khader Adnan is a terrorist, just like they said of Bobby Sands, because he dares speak out against injustice, because he dares to make a stand, because he dares believe that he is human and he does not deserve to live this way, because he dares to consider an alternative, because he dares imagine a new day. Khader Adnan lost his liberty before he was born. To fight for life, it's death he must embrace. But just like others come before him, there are others waiting to take his place. And even the great powers can lose interest in supporting such a vicious status quo, because you can't break a man who won't be broken, like in Belfast not many years ago. Like in Belfast not many years ago.
So, and this next song, I think I fixed it since the last time that it kind of got truncated. On March 26th, 1978, the biggest windmill ever built went online in Ulfborg, Denmark. And I think it's a profoundly important date in history, really. And I think windmills are a profoundly important phenomenon that we need a heck of a lot more of, although as with just about anything, a good thing can be ruined, as anybody looking at the sort of massive windmill project in Ireland that will take up massive amounts of farmland and turn much of the country into a wind farm and then export all that energy to England. I mean, you can fuck up a good thing if you try hard enough, and leave it to governments like Great Britain or the United States to fuck up a good thing. But in any case, windmills are good, basically, and we need a hell of a lot more of them. And the movement that was responsible for building the first industrial scale windmill in Denmark needs to be thanked over and over again for changing history in a very positive way in the world generally. This windmill, Tvindkraft, is really the main reason why Denmark doesn't have a nuclear reactor, and why Denmark has become the country that produces the windmills.
It was in the 1970s. The fuel crisis had begun. The choices were presented to us as if we had none. Leaders of industry said they could solve the problem by mastering the power of the radioactive atom. Some folks in western Jutland got a notion in their heads. They thought there might be something they could offer up instead. A few hundred people gathered in a little place called Tvind and declared their will to harness the power of the wind.
they said, we're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. We're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. There were many who said their science wasn't sound, that such a mighty windmill would simply topple to the ground. Some of them were scientists, the vast majority were not, but they knew with years of effort you could do a lot. Word about the project spread far and wide. 100,000 visitors came to help and to advise, until one day these windmill builders drove in with a crane and lifted up their giant wings with a mighty chain. We're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. We're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. When Twindcraft was completed, it reached up to the sky. Its wings churned in the air at 54 meters high. The critics all fell silent. No one now was jeering, as even industry agreed this was some damn fine engineering. The wind regaled Jutland from the North Atlantic Sea as it was seamlessly converted into electricity. It was power for the people, leukemia for none, when they declared in Denmark, just south of the midnight sun. We're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. We're gonna build the biggest windmill in the world. They gave away the patents. They said knowledge should be free. And their plans were copied by a newborn industry. Soon Denmark would be known.
Ah! What? I thought I did fix it, but it's still not fixed. What the heck is up with this? Well, this is why I'm not a professional radio person or something. I don't know. But anyway, gosh, it was like it got cut off at like 1 minute before, and now it's gotten cut off at 3 minutes or so. Why does it get cut off at all? What's the deal? I got to pay more attention. Pay attention. Okay, well, hopefully that's only 2 truncated songs in the broadcast. March 28th, 1988. Mordechai Vanunu was convicted in absentia by an Israeli court for treason and espionage and sentenced to 18 years in prison. And he spent most of those 18 years in solitary confinement. And he is still in Israel, Palestine, trying to get out of the country, wanting to move to somewhere else, and they won't let him leave, although he's not in prison currently. And he has heard this song, and he likes it.
I was born in Marrakesh. I thought life was good. Then some visitors came from far away, convinced us that we should move from Marrakesh to Israel, what they called the Promised Land. That's how we ended up in Beersheba by the Negev desert sand. I turned 18 and joined the army. That's what everybody did. I learned to blow up bridges just like every other kid. I learned to fire weapons. I learned how to shoot to kill. Then I studied engineering and learned many other skills. I got a job, paid the rent, working just like you. I just did what I had to do. As the years went by, I learned many things, and I wondered what to do with
the burden knowledge brings. I learned about the massacres committed in my name. After Sabra and Shatila, life could never be the same. But I got up every morning, worked till the day was through, and I did what I had to do. Working in the desert, I did what I was told, though I'd long ago rejected the bill of goods I had been sold. I was supposed to ask no questions, but as the years passed by, I discovered what was going on there beneath the clear blue sky. I snuck a camera into work one day as my suspicions grew, and I did what I had to do. Once I left the country, I could no longer sit on the fence. I met with a reporter and displayed the evidence of the secret nuclear arsenal which I had helped to make. I had to blow the whistle for humanity's sake. The world simply had to find out the things my commanders knew. So I did what I had to do. Mossad came to get me on the streets of Rome, brought me in a boat back to my adopted home. After 18 years of torture in a tiny prison cell, on the street some people ask me how I lived so long in hell. Each morning when I woke up, I remembered it was true that I did what I had to do. I did what I had to do. And on the same date as Vanunu was convicted some years later, on March 28th, 2004, James Harar Perez became the third unarmed African-American in 25 months to be killed by police in Portland, Oregon, my adopted hometown, which has statistically, in terms, if you adjust for the population, it is the worst city to be a black man in as far as police murders of black men. It is the most dangerous city in the United States to be a black man as far as the police are concerned. And Oregon has quite a history of racism with the Sunset Laws and a lot of other stuff that were designed to keep out people of color of all kinds. Blacks, Asians, so here's a song dedicated to the men in blue in this here city.
Portland is a town that's in the news much of the time. There are a lot of vegans and there's very little crime. It's a nice, safe place to live. Folks ride bicycles a lot. The winters aren't so cold and the summers aren't so hot. They build houses out of cob. They hang out in the park, where you needn't worry about walking after dark. There are lots of homeless people, but they don't hurt no one. Just be careful of the boys in blue playing with their guns. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 You can hang out with the punks with the piercings and tattoos. You can eat out at a food truck any neighborhood you choose. You can dance to Balkan music while you drink a microbrew, chilling in a gay bar with the mayor and his crew. But be careful what you do, be prepared to get some flack, especially for those who may be male, young and black. The fact is you do better in Sweet Home Alabama. You're safer there on the old streets of Birmingham. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 Portland's full of roses, there are flowers everywhere, but for others they've got prisons with some nice electric chairs. You can go downtown, ride the buses there for free, but you never know when you'll get a DWP. A town full of progressives, but such a rotten bunch of cops. Who knows who'll get shot at the next routine traffic stop? When you live in a place like Portland, where they tend to act this way, you can just join the police force instead of the KKK. Yeah, watch out for the cops. 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 Watch out for the cops.
And that is the great Nick Angelo on lead guitar, and lots of great folks singing and everything. That's from the album Meanwhile in Afghanistan, which you can download for free at davidrovics.com, which also has Tom Morello playing lead guitar on one song. And so I'm going to wrap this show up. I really appreciate all you people listening and all you wonderful folks from around the beautiful planet in the chat room there. I think, as usual, we have at least 4 countries represented, 4 or 5. And that is what I like about the internet. And so I'll do one more song here and just mention a few commercial announcements, I suppose, although not very commercial. Let's see. I think first of all, I'll do a show about April in history and song at the end of March, last Sunday in March. I'll plan on doing that one, and then who knows if I'll get around to doing May, because I will be very busily on tour throughout England, Scotland, and Wales in April, and then in May throughout Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. So obviously you can go to davidrovics.com and see where I'm playing. There's still a couple of free dates left, although it's pretty packed tour at this point. Which will also, as recently, a bunch of dates were confirmed in Germany, which are associated with the group Attack, and it's all about opposing the TPIP, the TTIP, it's the free trade bill between U.S. and Europe that they're trying to railroad through various parliaments and congresses. I think I might do a broadcast here on Spreaker about free trade bills, and since I've got a lot of stuff on that, and I'm going to work on a song about the TPP and the TTIP. And what else? Thanks to all those folks who may or may not be listening now, who have subscribed to me today after responding to the email I sent out to my list. That is so much appreciated. Makes all the difference and in the world. And if anybody wants to know more about that, just go to davidrovics.com and click on the subscribe button, and you can read about that and think about whether you are willing or able to join the scheme to crowdsource my career. And what else? I got a couple of gigs in Portland, if anybody's listening in Portland, at the end of this month. And then I fly off to London on April 2nd. I leave here. I leave here April 1st. Arrive on April 2nd. And yeah, what else? I don't know what else I was going to say. Something probably. But we can leave it at that. And getting back to March in history and song on March 28th. I was going to say, if you are wondering, when my next show is happening, and you don't, the way you can find out most easily about when my internet radio shows are happening and stuff like that is by getting on my Twitter feed or Facebook or getting on my email lists on my website, or just looking at the website, because I put it up in the gigs window. It's kind of like a gig. It is a gig, I suppose. Gig is a very broad term. March 28th, same day as James Harar Perez was killed by the Portland police in 2011, a few years later. There was yet another asylum seeker killed by in an Australian detention center, which at that time in 2011, in March 2011, was the fifth death in just over 6 months in Australian detention centers. So I will leave you with a song that was inspired by the situation in Australia and detention centers, and meeting a young Filipino woman in Melbourne who was also writing songs on this kind of subject, a woman named Celine. And she's got a record out there. If you look, I can't remember her last name, but I bet you can find it. And I wrote this song before their ship arrived. And I will play this, and thank you all once again for listening, and hope to see you in the chat room and elsewhere on tour and in the next show that I'm doing here and wherever else. Thank you.
My father's mother's parents came here on a boat. They came from a land of kings and queens, but on the wrong side of the moat. My father's parents came here on one too. They didn't want to leave Austria, but it was the thing for Jews to do. I don't know your story, but I'll bet it's more or less the same. What kind of war or famine was on when your family came before their ship arrived? Did your folks come here to discover and explore, or were they refugees running from the war? Did they cross the freezing mountains to make it to the sea, all the while wishing that they never had to flee? Were they marched across the jungles with chains around their feet, nearly dying of exhaustion in the desert heat before their ship arrived? Did they make a life here, or were they kidnapped and detained, held for years in limbo as their optimism waned? Were they turned down for asylum
and told they shouldn't lie, then sent off to be tortured, sent back home to die. Did they get to move here, create their lives anew? Or are they held on Christmas Island, asking what on earth they can do before their ship arrived? Before their ship arrived.